Welcome to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you are having a fantastic Friday evening. And of course, one thing that is contributing to that is the Braves getting a big victory against the Royals 3-0, backed by one of the best pitching performances from Max Fried we have seen in quite a while. Awesome to be with you once again. Part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts, Hammer Territory, always with you, covering the latest when it comes to the Braves, and I am so thrilled once again. It's been a while since I've been able to talk with you, but as always, my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, if I could describe tonight in the best way possible that I can think of, Max Fried made the most. He did his best to make what was potentially his last start at Truist Park as a Brave as memorable as possible. But even more importantly to me, he did everything that he could to ensure this was not his last start as a Brave, and it was awesome to see. Good to talk with you again, sir.
What's up, Shawn? Yeah, man, it's been a minute since me and you did one of these. What a game. What a fun game that was tonight. 1 hour and 59 minutes. It was a rapid, nice, tidy little game. Of course, that's, expected when the other team only has 3 hits and no runs. And yeah, it's the Max Fried game, quite honestly. I mean, that's games like this is where he got the nickname, Maximum, because he was unbelievable tonight. It reminded me a lot of Game 6 of the World Series a few years ago against Houston, where he was just not going to lose. And the Braves gave him just enough offense where he could stay in the game and feel comfortable, and made it all the way to the ninth inning, 2 outs in the ninth before Iglesias had to come in. So huge game. We're going to talk about it, of course, but yeah, it's always good to do these with you, man.
Absolutely. And the thing that stands out to me about this game when it comes to Max, Stephen, is that it was a reminder of this, in my opinion. Max, over the past couple of years, he's dealt with some injuries, some arm injuries, never really been too in danger of being. I know he was out for a few months last year, but never really, been a concern that it was something that would keep him out, like, Tommy John or things like that. I know there's been a couple of scares, but he's come back from those injuries, and at times he struggled. He seems like, here over the past month, coming back from his August injury, it seemed like he was struggling with his control, struggling with his command at times. But what stands out to me is this, is that you mentioned it, and it's going to be, if this truly is the last year that Max Fried is going to be in a Braves uniform, I feel that one of the biggest things that's going to stand out, beyond just him being one of the best pitchers we've seen really in franchise history, I know that is maybe a stretch for some, but it's true in my opinion, but big game Max. Again, as you mentioned, Maximum, he consistently shows up in big games, and he did that tonight, and he was masterful tonight. He was absolutely in control. He wanted that complete game shutout, but Max did everything that he needed to do to be able to do well against a team that's likely going to be in the playoffs. Big game Max showed up tonight. He had a big game, and it was at the time that the Braves needed it most, and it just once again goes to show that he truly is one of the best pitchers we've seen in recent Braves history, and also one of the best pitchers in the game in big moments.
Even if you set all of that stuff aside, like even if you set aside the fact that, it's very possible this was his last game in Atlanta in Truist Park as a Brave, which it is. I mean, everybody has kind of admitted that, and even Max tonight after the game was talking as if, he was talking like somebody who probably did pitch his last game in Atlanta unless they make the playoffs and then make a run, because remember, none of the wild card games are going to be in Atlanta. So for him to pitch another game in Atlanta, they're going to have to make a serious run. But even if you set all of that aside, just pitching like that when the Braves have to play 5 games in 4 days, and you save the bullpen had to throw 1 pitch tonight. And, with the schedule the Braves have now because of this hurricane and having 2 games on Monday and then the playoffs start, if things break your way, the playoffs start on Tuesday, their bullpen is very likely going to get used a bunch. And not having to basically pitch at all tonight is massive. It's just it's a massive, massive deal. And obviously, of course, winning the game is the most important thing, but getting a win without having to basically use any of your bullpen, Iglesias threw 1 pitch, is huge. And now everybody is fully loaded for tomorrow. The Snit can be hyper aggressive with a bullpen tomorrow. If he goes out and throws 100 pitches in the first 4 innings and they have to burn through their entire bullpen tonight, it's a very different feeling. So just a huge game, a huge, huge game for Max tonight. in the Braves, and they're set up really well going forward. We're going to talk about some of the decisions they're making for the next couple of games. We're going to talk about the scoreboard watching aspect, but just from Max's perspective and the Braves' perspective and the bullpen's perspective, it was just a massive, massive game tonight.
But the other thing I want to hit on, and I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, things are going about as good as they can for the Braves tonight in terms of what they can control and external factors. We'll discuss that in just a moment. But to your point, the other thing that stood out, I'm watching the highlights right now, where I saw Iglesias presenting Max Fried with the ball after, the handshake. It was an awesome moment to see. But this also goes to show what you saw tonight, again, against a team that's likely going to be in the playoffs, in the Royals, is that if the Braves can shorten the game by Chris Sale and then Max Fried and then their bullpen, if they can use their best pitchers as often as possible, they can really be a threat in the playoffs. Again, they've got to get there first. I'm not trying to get a hold of things, but tonight was a reminder that this Braves team can make noise. And if Max Fried is on his game like this as we move forward, and he has every reason to be going into free agency, if the Braves get the chance with Sale and Fried at the top of their rotation, they really could make some noise if Max Fried is on like this.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this team, and we've talked about this all year. We've seen this team have absolutely dominant starting pitching all year long. I mean, when Sale and Max and Ronaldo and Schwellenbach are all going, I mean, all of those guys, you would not be surprised at all if they threw 7 innings of shutout ball. Morton's probably not at that level anymore, but the other 4 guys are certainly at that level. And we saw in 2021, like that's how the Braves carried great pitching all the way through the postseason and won a World Series. Max and Charlie Morton were kind of the aces of that staff, and then the bullpen was incredible, and they pitched their way to a World Series. And it absolutely, this team can make a run if they get in, because, and I said this before, nobody wants to see Chris Sale and Max Fried and Ronaldo Lopez and Spencer Schwellenbach in a short series. Like you don't want to see those guys. The Braves have the second best ERA in all of baseball. They're number 1 in baseball in pitching WAR. Their pitching staff has been unbelievable. They have 2 of the top 15 relievers in baseball. Like you do not want to face this team in a short series. And we've said that over and over again. And that's before you even talk about, the fact that the offense has showed a little life lately, not much tonight, but they have shown more life in September than they have basically any month other than April. So, but they got to get in, and that's the big thing. And tonight was a huge step in that direction.
I love a great deal, but I'm not going to run sprints in the outfield just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. With Mint Mobile, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. Purchase and activation is super easy too.
To get started, go to mintmobile.com/territory. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/territory. That's mintmobile.com/territory. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/territory.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
So, of course, let's talk a bit about that direction, and that's going to lead to kind of, looking at the Braves through the rest of this weekend into potentially what's going to be quite a potential into the season going into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. As we're recording this, it's about 9:13 Central, 10:13 Eastern. Looking at the other things that need to occur for the Braves to truly make the run that they want to make, to first get into the playoffs. Three other series this weekend are important to the Braves. Mets versus Brewers, Diamondbacks versus Padres, and then at least for Friday night, Orioles and Twins. And here is how those scores are as of right now. The Brewers are ahead of the Mets 6-2 in the bottom of the 6th inning. The Orioles are ahead of the Twins 3-0 going into the top of the 8th inning, and the Padres are ahead of the Diamondbacks 4-2 going into the top of the 2nd inning. Each and every one of those results are exactly what the Braves want to see happen with the fact that they won. If that occurs, then the Braves will go into Saturday tied with the Diamondbacks and the Mets for that last spot in the wild card. And the Royals will have made the playoffs, which means they don't have any incentive to play at their best for the rest of the weekend. So, Stephen, it's been a season where we've seen both in terms of what we can control, what we can't control. Very few times has it gone the Braves' way as well as this. It's nice to see a bit of a break on Friday night, and it's really setting up to where the Braves could make this a really awesome weekend if things continue to go their way with what they can and cannot control.
Yeah, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves yet, but as things stand now, and like Shawn said, we're recording at about 10:15 Eastern. The Twins and the Baltimore Orioles are and they're the closest one to being done in their eighth inning. And just for people who don't understand the significance of that game, if the Orioles win that game, that means the Twins are eliminated and the Royals clinch a wild card spot. And if the Royals clinch a wild card spot, then that means it's very unlikely. As it stands now, they have their two best pitchers set to pitch tomorrow and Sunday. Obviously, because when they came into the series, they needed to get one more win. If the Twins lose tonight, then they don't need that one more win. And it's very likely that they would scratch their two best pitchers. So they're both ready to go for a wild card series, which obviously is easier for the Braves if they don't have to face, Seth Lugo and Regan's on Saturday and Sunday. So that, it might not be as obvious as the Mets and Diamondbacks games, but that Baltimore game is actually very important. And by the time you're listening to this, you'll probably know the results to all these games. But as we're talking about it, we're still in the middle of all three of these. So, but yeah, so far so good. It's broken exactly the way the Braves needed. If the Mets and Diamondbacks just want to lose all weekend, that makes things a hell of a lot easier for us. If the Royals want to shut it down after clinching tonight, because the Twins lost, that makes it easier for us. So yeah, it hasn't gone this way a lot for the Braves. The Braves have been a pretty good team over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And because the Mets and the Diamondbacks and the Padres have been so hot, they haven't been able to really gain any ground. So it'd be nice for at least one weekend where things break the Braves' way. And so far, so good. We're not to the end of these games yet, but so far, in terms of how it could have gone, it's gone about as good as it could have so far through, the early part of Friday night.
And that makes the next thing that I want to discuss with you, Stephen, even more intriguing. Because the Braves are, if you look at it so far on Friday night, they come out smelling like flowers, right? Like with some decisions that they made when it comes to their pitching staff. Max Fried getting the start. The Braves announced that on Thursday. And with his performance, every other game that could possibly go the best way for the Braves, it is. The Braves look like that they made the right call. But that is more, I think, things kind of working out in the best possible way than, just the Braves making the absolute best call. Like, that, I feel, is something that's definitely worth discussing. It's great that it worked out as it did. But, Stephen, I know that you have some interesting thoughts. When the Braves came out and announced that Max Fried was going to start on Friday night, they've gone ahead and announced that Ronaldo Lopez, who has gotten very good reports through working through his injury, he'll be back on Saturday, which is a great scenario for the Braves. He'll be starting for the Braves against the Royals on Saturday. It's worked out for the Braves without a doubt. But just because it worked out doesn't mean that it certainly was a gamble for the Braves to kind of position their pitchers as they have, because of course we all know it's going to be very interesting to see what they're eventually going to do with Chris Sale when it comes to how results continue to happen through the weekend.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this. I almost did a solo show last night just to specifically talk about this when they dropped the news. But I thought we would just roll it into tonight's show. So let's set it up. So the Braves get rained out Thursday's game against the Mets. Everybody knows that. And so on Thursday, what everybody was doing, everybody who covers the team in any regard, I was doing this, Scott was doing it, the beat writers were doing, everybody was essentially putting out their best guesses as to how the Braves were going to set up their rotation for the weekend. With all the factors included, it's a very complicated set of scenarios because there's multiple teams, there's a doubleheader, there's tiebreakers, there's a bunch of stuff that you have to consider here. And everybody just assumed that Chris Sale would pitch on Friday and Max Fried would pitch on Saturday. And the reason everybody assumed that is because if you did that, then that means that if things break your way the rest of the weekend, then Chris Sale and Max Fried would be available to pitch games 2 and 3 of a wild card series. And it's slightly more complicated than that, but that is essentially the gist of it. And that's, everybody that I kind of follow and trust and who covers this stuff as closely as we do kind of had the same guess that Sale was going to pitch on Friday and Max was going to pitch on Saturday. And if everything else broke their way, then those two guys would be able to pitch, and both would be able to pitch in a wild card series. So we get to Friday, or we get to Thursday night, and they announce that Max Fried is going to pitch he's going to pitch tonight's game, and that Chris Sale doesn't have a day where he's set to pitch. They're basically going to just go day by day and wait and see when Chris is going to pitch. And of course, this was very controversial because it was essentially saying that best case scenario, Chris Sale is going to pitch the third game of a wild card series because, if he doesn't pitch Friday, if he pitches Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, he's not going to be available to pitch in the wild card round. And if he pitches Saturday, the only game he would be available to pitch in a wild card round would be the last game. And the last game is not guaranteed, of course. It's a best 2 out of 3. So if you lose the first 2, then Chris Sale wouldn't pitch at all. And obviously this is what, if you were online when this got announced, people were very confused. They were like, is Chris Sale hurt? What's going on? And so that's the backdrop for this discussion. And I do want to say this. There is a world in a scenario where the Braves look brilliant here because, things worked out really well tonight, or at least they have so far. And there is a world where the Braves do not have to pitch Chris Sale at all in any of these games because the other teams lose. You keep winning, the Royals clinch and therefore, start playing their B team. And you don't have to pitch Chris Sale in any of these games, and he can just be ready to pitch in game 1 of a wild card series. Like that option is still on the table. They're going to go with Ronaldo tomorrow. They announced that after the game. And if they win that game, I'm guessing they'll go with Morton or Schwellenbach for Sunday's game. And they're just going to keep kind of kicking this can down the road. And hopefully, I'm guessing at least, they're hoping they don't have to use Chris Sale at all until the wild card round. If that doesn't work, if they do, like let's say they lose tomorrow with Ronaldo on the mound and they realize they have to win Sunday, and then they decide to pitch Sale on Sunday, then you get into the downside of this kind of gambit that they're running. Because if he has to pitch Sunday because you lost on Saturday, and let's just say the Mets and the Diamondbacks win on Saturday, and all the good games you got tonight, you give right back, and you feel like you have to pitch him on Sunday. If you pitch him on Sunday, then he's not available for the wild card series at all, even if things break your way after that and you make it. And he's also not available for the 2 games against the Mets, right? So this is a high risk, high reward kind of gambit the Braves are running with Chris Sale. And I do understand, and I was critical of it online yesterday because I do think there's a lot of risk associated with it. Less so now because it's gone pretty well tonight. But there's also there is an upside. Like there is a side of this where you get best case scenario where you clinch without having to use Sale at all, and he's just ready to pitch game 1. And because Max pitched tonight, he could pitch game 2. And that's, if you're talking about best case scenario, that's what that is best case, where you clinch and you get Sale and Max Fried for game 1 and game 2 of a playoff series. But there's also the downside where you have to pitch him before that, and he's not available for any sort of wild card series. And that's obviously not great. So it is a very interesting gambit they're running. It's a very interesting risk. It is high risk, high reward. It's worked out tonight really well. So you have to give them credit for that. There was a path tonight where it wasn't going to work out so well, and it would have looked much worse. And we'll see how the rest of the weekend goes. I'm very interested to see if they lose tomorrow with Ronaldo on the mound and say the Mets and the Diamondbacks win. I'm very interested to see what they would do Sunday. If they would go Schwellenbach, if they would go Sale. I don't think they would go Morton, but there's a lot of moving parts with this, obviously, because there's multiple teams involved. Night to night results change everything. It's going to be very interesting.
Well, and the thing that I'll also say to this is that you're right, there is upside where if they don't have to use Sale, sure, that's best case scenario. But also I think a thing that's playing a bigger factor into this than I think the Braves would ever admit. Is the other upside of this is that each day that Sale does not pitch, that's one more day of rest for him. I'm not necessarily suggesting that there's an injury scare or anything like that. I don't think that there is, a significant level of concern in terms of that. I do feel that with this being the most innings that Sale has pitched in, I think since 2018, maybe 2019, that there is a heightened level of awareness, especially after a bit of concern in his last start, that what do you need to do to preserve Sale to ensure that when he does start, you can guarantee as much as you can, you get the Sale that we've seen all season. I think that there is a bit of concern that there is fatigue setting in with him, that maybe he's not going to be as crisp as he has been this entire season. So I bring that up to say that, yeah, it's high risk, high reward, but I also think that something that's playing into this is that the Braves are going to have to make sure that they pay closer attention to how they use Sale moving forward than they have throughout the season, and that is a relevant part of the equation when it comes to how he's going to be utilized, even when he starts, if he does for the rest of the regular season, and even if he's used in the playoffs. The Braves are going to have to be very, very aware of just how far he can go into games.
Yeah. And the other point I'll make is this, because I was actually sitting down doing the kind of not the equation, but I was kind of doing the matchups for the rest of the week. There's also a scenario where the Braves get to Monday and they only need to win one of the two games to clinch everything they need to clinch. And in that scenario, they could actually hold Sale back for game 2. And if you can win game 1, then you're back to like your A+ scenario where you didn't have to use Sale at all. You've clinched, and now he can pitch game 1 of the wild card round. And if you lose game 1, then you just pitch Sale. If you lose game 1 and game 2 is basically a win or go home game, that's basically a playoff game anyways. And you have your best pitcher ready to go for that game. So it is a very risky proposition they're running here. I do get the logic of what they're doing, because there is a path where they look brilliant at the end of this. And either Chris Sale is pitching like the second game against the Mets, which is a win or go home, basically a playoff game anyways, or he's pitching game 1 of the wild card round because he didn't have to pitch at all this weekend. But there's also a scenario where it goes poorly, of course. And tonight going the way it has gone mitigates that a little bit, but it was very interesting, and it was unexpected. Again, everybody who covers the team, who follows it like we do, was very surprised by the announcement. With the injury stuff, he was set to pitch on Wednesday. Like, he was going to pitch Wednesday if that game didn't get rained out. And after the game, he threw a bullpen after that. So I don't know if he's 100% healthy, but I do think he's healthy enough where if he was able to pitch Wednesday and he was healthy enough to throw a bullpen after the game got rained out, I do think he's healthy enough to pitch. Now, he might not be 100%, and a lot of guys his age are not 100% at this time of year. I do think he's healthy enough to pitch, but they are not concerned with him having too many off days. Some guys, they are concerned with that. Max Fried is one of them. They don't want to give him too many off days. Sale is not like that. Sale apparently is fine with as many off days they need to give him. So I do think they're trying to play a gambit where they're holding him as long as possible in the hopes that they don't have to use him at all. And the Mets and the Diamondbacks and the Twins and all the teams that need to lose keep losing. The Braves keep winning, and they can just hold them for game 1 of a wild card. We'll see if it actually works out that way. It's a risk, of course, but I do want to make sure we talked about the upside, because I spent a lot of time on Twitter talking about the downside, and I don't think that was fair. I think I needed to spend more time at least mentioning like the logic behind the move, because there is upside to it. It's just a kind of a classic high risk, high reward.
Well, then let's talk about the other factor in all of this that could make the upside have a better chance of continuing to come through. And that is the Braves offense. On Friday night, the Braves won 3-0. I get it. That is kind of how they've won all season long. You look at it, you think, okay, the Braves offense went silent. In terms of, what they typically do, that is true. But I will say this. Matt Olson, he did his job tonight to an extent, in my opinion. Marcell Ozuna, he did his job tonight, in my opinion. I bring that up to say this. When it comes to what is going to separate the Braves from their competition, this weekend against the Royals, potentially in that doubleheader against the Mets, and with who they may face in the wild card round in the playoffs if they make it. I will go on record to say that none of the teams that the Braves will face between now and through the wild card series, none of them have an offensive duo that can reach the upside of Matt Olson and Marcell Ozuna. Now, it's on those two to deliver on that promise, to validate that claim. And I think they can. But it's really going to help out if others can step up. And another area where the Braves could be advantageous is when it comes to their catching duo of Shawn Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud. And we know that Travis d'Arnaud has delivered in big moments all season long. But, Stephen, it was Shawn Murphy who stepped up on Friday night. I'm not all of a sudden confident that we're going to get the Shawn Murphy of the first half of 2023. But what I will say is this, is that it does reveal one thing about this Braves offense that could be a very, very good development. If at least one person can step up each night to support Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, hopefully Michael Harris II. If at least one other person can step up to have a big game, this team can win frequently, and it was at least good to see Shawn Murphy showing power. It was the difference on Friday night.
Yep. And before I get to Shawn Murphy real quick, just Orioles are up 7-0 on the Twins in the 8th, so they are demolishing the Twins. Twins are about to be eliminated, which means the Royals are about to clinch, and Brewers are up 7-2 against the Mets. So just an update. But yeah, listen, I'm a pretty well-known Shawn Murphy defender. I love Shawn Murphy. He's had a bad season. Like, there's no defending the season he's had. He's been, really bad in September. I do think the oblique muscle at the beginning of the year, he was out for 2 months. I just don't think he ever caught back up. When you miss the first 2 months and come back, everybody you're playing has been playing for 2 months and has gotten kind of all the early season rust knocked off. And so you're playing against guys who are much more like in season ready than you are. And I think he's just been playing catch up the whole year. His swing has been a mess all year. I think he's been fighting it. It doesn't help that, he's a split time player. Like, he plays 50 to 60% of the time because the Braves do that with catchers. That doesn't help when you're trying to catch up after you miss the first 2 months. But he's had a bad season. But I love Shawn Murphy. And of course, he hit the big homer tonight. In classic kind of 2024 Shawn Murphy fashion, he then came up with, 2 runners on, second and third with 1 out, and had just an absolutely abysmal at bat and had a horrible strikeout. And those 2 at bats happened back to back, which is just a perfect encapsulation of Shawn Murphy's season this year. But I'll always believe in Shawn Murphy. I know William Contreras has had an awesome year with Milwaukee, and that has not helped in terms of people, having very, very strong and negative feelings towards Murph. And I understand that. I'm not going to try to defend it. That trade does not look great this year. I do think people have rapidly, and I mean rapidly, forgotten how good Shawn Murphy has been his entire career. Like, the lowest WRC plus he's ever run in any season is still in triple digits. Like, he is a very, very good hitter and has been his whole career. He's a very good catcher. He's not having a good year. I'm not going to defend that, but I don't think we need to be using 1 year to erase an entire guy's body of work for his career. But yeah, if he wants to get going in these last, few games this last week into the playoffs, I'm not going to complain. His swing is still a little bit of a mess. He's getting in 0-2 counts pretty much every time he hits. Even the homer was on an 0-2 count. So that's a tough way to make a living. He's not seeing the ball well. He's still swinging at bad pitches. So I'm not overly confident. I think it's probably going to take a full off season of staying healthy and being able to hit to get him back to where he was last year. But it was a huge homer tonight. I mean, obviously that was the difference in the game, or not the difference, because Marcell ended up scoring on that crazy play in the 8th, which we should probably mention. But yeah, I love Murphy. I'll always love Murphy. I'm going to defend Murphy till the end because I think he's a great player. But he has not had a good year this year. There's no defending that. And if he wants to pick it up the last week, then I'm not going to argue.
Absolutely, and it will certainly be great to see. But I want to, as we're wrapping up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast, I want to shine the spotlight again on just how clutch this performance from Max Fried was. The dominance that he showed in and of itself is great. But we also, there's been a lot of discussion about, the 2 days that were rained out, how that was handled. How do the Mets and the Braves come out looking, in terms of, they're into the season, and if one or both of them enter the playoffs, where does that position them? Well, let's look at it from this perspective. Since Tuesday, there has only been one Braves pitcher who has thrown more than one pitch, and that is Max Fried. And he made the most of all of his pitches. So that means going into Saturday, not only do you have Ronaldo Lopez coming back to adding into your pitching staff, which is a great development, you have Grant Holmes, who can be there to, if Ronaldo can only go 3 or 4 innings, Grant Holmes can go multiple innings. You have a fresh Joe Jimenez. You have a fresh rest of your bullpen, including Raisel Iglesias. You go into Sunday, every one of your starters besides Fried and Lopez are more than ready to go once again. The way that this is set up for the Braves going into Saturday and beyond is really, really good, with arguably the best pitching staff in baseball as fresh as possible. And we can talk about the offense. If the offense can do what it does, that's great. But I think that it really stands out that it's the level of freshness that this pitching staff is, and that's something that the Braves can dial into, especially if the Royals have nothing to play for. And Steven, that makes me very confident. That makes me confident going into this game on Saturday. I know we're taking it one game at a time, but yes, while the offense, if it can live up to its potential, really can put the Braves in a good position, the freshness of this pitching staff to me stands out as a big advantage as well. And hopefully we'll be able to dial into that and keep this pitching staff fresh as we go day by day, and hopefully win by win.
Yeah, I mean, they are set up. I mean, getting Ronaldo back, it's going to be very interesting to see what he looks like tomorrow. If he's just back to normal, and they have Sale, Max, who is as good as he's been all year tonight, Ronaldo, Schwallenbach, who's been awesome lately. If they have all 4 of those guys going and relatively rested, I mean, if they pull this off where they don't have to pitch Sale until the wild card game, like we were just talking about, if somehow they actually manage that will be Sale's first start in 14 days. He will have been as rested. Now, at some point you get to is that too much rest, where the guy's just going to be rusty as hell, and that's always a risk. Snit talked about in his post game. He just said he doesn't worry about that with Chris. That Chris is a guy that can have as many off days as possible and it really not affect him. So they're banking on that not being a problem. But yeah, I mean, and obviously Ronaldo's been out for 15 days and because he's been on the IL. So yeah, I mean, and the bullpen, like you said, with all the off days and Max doing damn near a complete game tonight, everybody's going to be well rested. Now we'll have to see how we get through this doubleheader on Monday. If those games have to be played, if those games, there is a scenario where the games have to be played, but they don't necessarily have to be cared about that much. So, whether they're played, I don't think is actually the important thing. It's whether both games are necessary for the Braves, because that determines how exactly they play them. And there's multiple ways to play games that you don't really care about where you're not actually using anybody important. So that's going to be interesting to see, but obviously it's going to come down to how, the Braves play the rest of the weekend, how the Mets, the Mets are losing 7-2 right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of these teams play. And it's literally going to change kind of hour by hour as we watch all these games, what the Braves need, what other teams need. So far tonight, it has gone as well as it could have gone. But the games aren't over tonight either. So we have to wait and see, but yeah, this is, in terms of, if you look at the 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, at this point in the night, Friday has gone about as well as it could have gone for the Braves.
And the other great thing about Friday night, with it going as well as it has for the Braves, both in terms of what they can and cannot control, it puts them in a better position to control their own destiny. And what that means is just win. That's all you got to do is just win. And I know that we've seen the Braves time and time again have these letdowns this season when it comes to winning, but we've also seen them bounce back. I think this team realizes that they have zero room for error, but also if they can make the most of that, if they can win, they have a formula that can work in the postseason. They just need a chance, and I think they're going to be motivated to see what can happen. Steven, do you have anything else for us as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
No, I'm going to be very see what changes Kansas City makes to their rotation tomorrow, because again, Orioles are crushing the Twins. The Twins are about to be eliminated, so KC is almost certainly not going to throw their best 2 starters the next 2 days. So I'm curious to see, Bobby Witt probably isn't going to play at least one of these 2 games. Salvador Perez probably isn't going to play. Sometimes that can be a scary thing because they put in a bunch of backups and a pitcher you've never heard of, and you end up getting shut out for 6 innings and losing 2-1. And I know Braves fans have a particular fear of that because of how some of the games have gone this year against bad teams. But I would much rather face, a couple of, relatively bad pitchers than face the 2 best guys the Royals have. So I'm going to be interested to see once this Baltimore Twins game goes final, I'll kind of jump onto the Royals Twitter and see exactly what they're going to do. But really good start tonight for the weekend for the Braves. Obviously, we'll track the rest of the games. We are going to be doing a show damn near every night during this stretch. I don't know if we'll have one tomorrow night. Tomorrow night might be the only night we don't do a show, but we might still do a show if something crazy happens. So yeah, make sure you're subscribed, tuned in, because this is the time of the year, obviously, where it gets crazy, and we will have it all covered.
And I'm just going to go on the record and say this. If we're talking about crazy, I'm going to get crazy. This was not the last start that Max Fried makes at Truist Park in a Braves uniform. I am highly confident that's the case. We'll go with it, and that's how we'll end this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast. For Stephen Tolbert, you can find him at B_Outliers on Twitter/X. My name's Shawn Coleman at StatsSEC on Twitter/X. Hammer Territory across all forms of social media. Part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Until next time, a big Braves victory. Go Braves. We'll talk to you again on the Hammer Territory podcast.